How you doing, everybody? Time for another issue of Howard Talks About Hot Bike. Top magazine on this pile is the June 2000 issue of Hot Bike, which featured Sammy Hagar on a bike built for them by Covington's Customs. But you'll notice I'm teasing you with some other magazines because I'm kind of teasing what the next couple things will be. And the next one will be a look at the famous hot bike issue where Jesse James jumped the El Diablo. Then after that, I'm going to go back to my roots and talk about Hot Rod Harleys, which was actually, it became Hot Rod Bikes. Talk about my friend Frank Keisler, and the guy who really taught me everything I know about Harleys was Frank. He shared so much knowledge with me when I worked with him. And then we're going to jump into an issue of Street Chopper. So a little bit of everything for everybody. But right now, we're going to talk about Hot Bike June 2000 with Sammy Hagar. First thing I wanted to take a look at in this issue was we had a Buell Blast as a long-term test bike. And if you're not familiar with the Blast, it was a single-cylinder Sportster, 500 cc's, stupidly fun motorcycle for beginners. I mean, Eric Buell built it specifically for beginners. I will find the issue with the road tests that we did on it, and I'll tell you the double dark secret stuff about the Buell that I knew about before anyone else knew about it, because Eric and I were friends. But even that stupid little beginner 500cc bike, we couldn't resist putting a pipe on it just to see if we could make it any faster. So I thought you might find that kind of interesting to see. Real quick, here's an ad from Jim Nassy, because Jim Nassy was really cool and did really cool bikes, so we thought we should feature his stuff, and we liked his ad, and, you know, it's kind of fun. Then we've got this Softail that was done by Tank Tough Cycles in Ohio. Just clean, period correct. I know I've mentioned those words period correct before, but again, remember, right? These bikes were the coolest of the cool back then. Everything you see, like looking at the fender struts with blind mounts and recessed gas caps, well, they're not recessed, they're low profile. The billet everywhere, the turned billet. I mean, that was a big deal, and it was really cool to see because you weren't seeing that everywhere else, and it was fun. And I just wanted to point out again, I know I've mentioned this before, but when we used to go do photography, right, we shot everything where it was the potential to be the cover bike and the potential to be a 2-page spread. So unfortunately, again, the black and white pages have to be in the magazine because of budgets. So here's this really great profile shot of this bike showing these really cool pipes. And they were Bartell's pipes, by the way, interestingly enough, if you've heard of Bartell's Harley-Davidson in Marina Del Rey, California. 88-inch Evo, basically all S&S, but unfortunately we had to show this in black and white, which kind of sucked. Now we're moving on to an in-depth article by a guy by the name of Ken Ross, and Ken was new to the magazine around now. Well, not around now, around the June 2000. And this was a story he couldn't wait to go do, and it was basically spend a day with Nigel Patrick at Patrick Racing and take a good look at how Nigel worked on the heads of the Harley and some of the CNC mill porting that he did, and just explaining the difference in what happens between stock and modified. And it was a super in-depth article with valve lift and measurements, and it was the kind of stuff that I was really glad that Ken loved going to do, because I didn't. I mean, I understood it, but it wasn't my world. Right? I loved letting the experts be the experts. So, and that was what we did at Hot Bike, right? We would always try to show people what the work was that needed to be done and how it needed to be done, so that if they were paying somebody to do it, they didn't feel like they were getting ripped off. So this bike was shot by Jeff Deasy, who no longer with us, unfortunately. He had a motorcycle accident, and well, anyway, Jeff was an amazing photographer, and Jeff loved to get these interesting shots. And I can tell you that he got up at ridiculously before dawn, excuse me, in Daytona to get these photos. But the guy that owned this bike was from Long Island, New York, and I'm going to read the first line of this article. When you hang around with guys that have names like Big Joe, Frankie the Eater, or Fast Sal, and you gather at a local Italian restaurant before hitting the streets of New York for a ride, people may wonder what you do for a living. Well, forget about it. Cheesy but fun, and we used to try and throw things like that into the article because that was a story typically that the owner of the bike would tell us. Now, this bike, fast, right? Nitrous, 3-inch open belt drive, chain drive, no belt drive on the back, chain drive, because that would typically not break when you had super big power. And this bike, I'll look it up real quick, but if I remember correctly, yeah, this was a 120-inch Merch motor with a zippers carb, a zippers cam, a redshift cam, headquarters ignition, a fully built 5-speed transmission. And the best part of that whole thing on this bike was it was built on a 95 Harley frame. So theoretically, this was still a Harley, but basically everything had been changed. And to get those beach shots, like I said, I mentioned about getting up really early in the morning. You'd have to get up before dawn, meet the person that you were going to do the photography with, head out to the location, and get the bike positioned, because you had about 25 minutes of soft light before the sun got glaring. And with all the chrome on the bikes, you had to shoot it in the soft light or it would just glare and look terrible. And it just made it really difficult to do your job. And we, of course, liked doing our job because we liked putting out the magazine. So I'm going to look at this ad real quick. Arlen Ness, who, if you know anything about our industry, considered the godfather of custom motorcycles, really the name in custom. And he passed away not too long ago, and another loss for the big part of the industry. But in this case, they were using Arlen to show the new Avon tires were so big, and, you know, like his hands go off the page. This is how wide the tires are. They were advertising the fact that the super fat Roadrunner was over 9 inches wide. Cool little Arlen Avon bike there in the picture, but focus was really on Arlen because they wanted people to think, if Arlen would use Avon tires, why wouldn't you? All right, so this bike, one of our readers wanted his bike in the magazine, and he found Jeff Hackett to shoot it for him and sent the stuff into us. But notice, doing his cool burnout shot, because that's what Hot Bike was known for, performance bikes and doing burnouts. And in this particular bike, had a little bit of everything going on. Was an FXR converted into a rigid, but the engine was still rubber mounted. Oh, and by the way, it's a shovelhead. And it was a Paco frame, and the more you looked at this bike, the more detail you found, and the more, I wonder why or how or what went on there. It was fun because our readers actually really built cool bikes that, you know, were worth getting in the magazine. This, by the way, this bike had a 110-inch shovelhead. Harley cases, S&S rods, pistons, Axtell cylinders, modified Harley heads, Lineweber cam, S&S carb, and 2-inch drag pipes, and a Harley 4-speed transmission in a Paco FXR rubber mount frame, but with rigid struts, because why be normal? And here we were doing a road test on a Sportster. That's Jeff doing a cool little wheelie on the 1200 Sport. That, by the way, was a great bike. Sportsters are, Sportsters are fun to begin with, but that bike had adjustable suspension, piggyback shocks with remote reservoirs, which made them work a little better, dual front brakes. It handled as well as a bike was going to handle, for a solid mount Sportster. All right, the rubber mounts, which came out later, were much better, but it was a fun bike. You couldn't help but go and do wheelies and burnouts and just play around on this bike as much as you could. And it had a good look to it too, with the factory blacked out pipes and just the minimalist graphics on it. Just a cool little bike. It was fun. We enjoyed it quite a bit. So here's a line in the article. It says here, it says fast and nimble and aggressive, so you become all the same as you dodge cars. See that spot just ahead between the SUV and the delivery truck? You can be in it before you realize it by dropping the clutch and hammering the throttle. See that Mustang in the next lane? You can take him from light to light. See the cute girl in the Nissan? Want her attention? Try carrying the front wheel all the way through first gear. The Sport will do it. Overall, we think Harley hit the mark they were looking for with the Sport. It's not a bike for everyone or every road, unless you want to modify it to be that way. But then again, isn't that half the fun of owning a Harley? Yeah, because nobody left them stock, right? You remember that. So, moving on through this issue of Hot Bike. Here's an ad from Paul Yaffe. And this was a bold statement that Paul made, because he won the 2000 Oakland Roadster Show champion with this bike, Prodigy. And the bike is beautiful. I mean, look at it. This is one of Paul's best bikes, and winning the Oakland Roadster Show is a big deal. So it was a great thing with his ad. Just, here's me. Here's the bike I built that was considered the world's most beautiful motorcycle. And that's cool, right? That's a bold statement to make. So now we're going to move on to the Red Rocker, Sammy Hagar. Jerry Covington Cycle City built this bike, and there's a ton of stories with this, but Sammy lived up in the Bay Area, so it was being delivered to him up there. So Dave Withrow and I flew up to spend the day with Sammy Hagar and the Covingtons, and I would do the photography, and it was going to be a fun day. And I mean, a beautiful bike, right? Everywhere you look at it, tiny little details, like the tail light with the 55 and the slash through it as a tail light. Supercharger, open belt drive, all the cool Covington components on it. Just beautiful, right? Just beautiful bike. Legend air suspension in the back to raise it up and down. 107-inch Evo that Cycle City built before they put the supercharger on it. And it's an EMC blower. They were pretty popular back then. But anyway, so here's the thing, and this is the thing, right? Sammy was a nice guy. He was insanely excited about the bike, and he wanted it built, and he was all over the idea of having this bike custom built for him. And, I told you we wanted a riding shot of every bike we had in the magazine. So we were talking to Sammy, like, you're good for doing the riding shot? He's like, I'm great for doing the riding shot. I can't wait to do the riding shot. And I was happy because I'm like, wow, great. This thing's going to sound good. It's going to look good. It's going to be fun to photograph. It's a great area to shoot in. Everything's open and there's no signs or posts or distractions. And Jerry Covington starts the bike up for Sammy, and Sammy looks over at Jerry and he goes, what's the shift pattern on this thing? I haven't ridden a bike since this old Triumph that I have about 7 or 8 years ago. And I just like, oh, my jaw dropped. I was like, oh man. Now, the riding shot that we have that you saw on the cover with Sammy riding by and kind of giving the little shaka signal at the camera in one hand and just cruising wide open, that was a 2-lane road. It was in the middle of nowhere, but it was a 2-lane road. So what Sammy needed to do was go back and forth while I took pictures. So again, film, so we took as many pictures as we could because You never knew just how perfect the focus was going to be because you couldn't look at it like you could with a digital camera. So after the first time Sammy turned around, and I realized he was turning around without looking over his shoulder to see if cars were coming or anything like that, it occurred to me to save 2 or 3 frames of film at the very end of each roll, just in case when Sammy turned around, I was going to get a photo that I could sell for a lot of money. Thank goodness nothing happened. But it was an interesting day. It was a very interesting day. I think Jerry and Kathleen Covington, Dave, myself, when he asked that shift pattern question, every single one of us saw our hearts drop as far as they could go. But hope you like that one because it was a cool bike and it was fun to do. Now, this, sorry, my phone rang. This ad for Arai, that was an incredibly big deal. Big deal because as you guys know, if you know anything about me, I'm a huge helmet proponent. And I used to wear an Arai a lot in the magazine, and convincing Arai to advertise in a Harley magazine, but not show any product and show the founder of Arai standing on the seat of a motorcycle with no helmet on. That was a pretty interesting way to go about this. So congrats to them on standing out in a crowd. And there it is. There's my Project Softail. That bike was built at V-Twin City in Pomona with nothing but parts that you could get from people that advertised in our magazine. And it was painted by Cole, and unfortunately Cole is another person that's no longer with us. It went through like 5 iterations of different components until I finally settled on what it was going to have on it. But man, I loved that bike. It was fun to ride. It was pretty quick for what it was. You know, I'm definitely more of a sporty bike. So in building this one, right, the focus was making it as rideable as possible and making it as enjoyable to ride as possible. And I focused on that, right? I wanted ground clearance as much as I could get with a Softail. I wanted a little bit of performance. I definitely wanted the looks, and I thought we had the looks for sure. So it was a Daytech frame with basically no stretch in it. It's 2 inches, but none for them because that's their standard. 35 degrees of rake, Legend air suspension in the back, stores 43 millimeters that were 1 inch over, again trying to get a little more ground clearance. 80-inch Evo that was built by TP Engineering with basically S&S internals, TP Engineering pistons, Harley heads that TP Engineering completely went through, a TP Engineering designed cam, and Mikuni carb, and my favorite Vance & Hines pipes. And PM wheels, 18 and 18, because I wanted it to be that way. And just, I mean, I could read you the spec list, but it just goes on and on and on. And it was just as many cool parts as we could find. I've mentioned Mike Berg, and when I'm done with the next 4 versions of this, I'll find the Mike Berg Minx cover and that issue. But this, even in this ad for 2000, was pretty interesting because Mike had designed some wheels that he was going to sell, and this whole reflection thing, and the reflection of the bike, and just upside down print, and just God, I wish I found Mike now, because I would love to do like a what do you call it, podcast, and just let you guys all hear what went through Mike's mind, because it was an interesting world to spend some time in. Mike was, he was something else. And let's see, what else do we have? We have this Ferrari bike. Well, it wasn't really a Ferrari bike, because it's not a Ferrari. It's a Harley. But this guy that built this bike at a shop called Ghost Riders Custom Cycles in Canoga Park, California, really liked Ferraris. So he built this bike kind of to be a tribute to Ferrari. And that was a big deal back then as well, was kind of having themed bikes. So, of course, the Ferrari Red, sorry, my cats are fighting. Well, they're not my cats, they're my wife's cats. Kenny Boy's Pro Street frame, and this cool louvered down panel between the down tubes and the little scoop, trying to make it look, you know, Ferrari-esque again, which is the best way I can explain it. And it was a 96-inch S&S, 5-speed Andrews transmission. It was a Kenny Boyce frame, 38 degrees of rake, no stretch, progressive suspension, RC Components wheels. And interesting, it was painted by Gerard Designs. Gerard Designs made his name as a custom helmet painter. And back in the days when sport bikes were the craze, everybody had a Gerard Designs custom painted helmet, and that was the thing to do. So now I want to look at Gearheads. And Gearheads was our little readers send us tips and, you know, help other readers out with things they've learned about working on bikes and things like that. And what we did, again, because we loved our readers and we wanted to like do the most we could for them, we would find sponsors for these departments. So in this case, it was Pro One. And we charged Pro One to be a sponsor because it was a pretty cool advertising thing. But everybody that we ran their letter, they got a $50 gift certificate from Pro One. So that was kind of cool, you know. Send in a tip and get a $50 gift certificate. And our Readers Rides and our Readers Showcase, same thing. Samson sponsored that, and I told you we charged for that. But everybody that got their bike featured in Readers Showcase got a $75 gift certificate towards Samson pipes. So again, it was just, we focused on our readers the whole time. Anything we could do to get them involved, we did. And then our flashback for that month was June of '85, which sounds really a long time ago, but it was only a 15-year flashback from when we were putting that issue out. So that was kind of interesting to, you know, it was only 15 years before that. But of course, now it's a really long time ago. So there's another issue of Hot Bike with a couple fun stories. I hope that you enjoyed it. Remember, next time I do this, which will hopefully be within a week, I will jump into that Jesse James issue. Then there'll be a Hot Rod Bikes and then a Street Chopper. Again, if you guys are enjoying this, please let me know in the comments. And thanks. Take care.